Because once again, that pulse bomb means there's insta-kill potential on a support. Leave though, spots him out first. Gonna be a rally and a blade here from Leave. Where's he going? He drops to the low ground, but Hydron's already gone. He gets with the immortality field, and now it's on for Young and Old. Aventurite if you're squeamish. Super tries to salvage things there with a Terror Surge, but it's way too late for that now. Kushui just bullies his way forward. And this is it. The death rattle of the United States. Your reigning champions have succumbed to the team from China.
More World Cup content today in the form of Team USA. What happened to Team USA? It looked so good from coming into this. They were playing this double flex comp with Illari Bap. It really suited them, and myself and a lot of people thought this was indeed the strongest meta comp. Saudi won the Overwatch World Cup playing a lot of this comp. They had one of the best Sigmas in the world in Kaluj. Everything seemed to line up for them, but it didn't work out. A lot of the players and staff talked about underperforming issues. Reddit was certainly pretty harsh on Team USA. So I thought, let's take a look at some of the Overwatch and figure out exactly how much of it was underperformance, what they could have fixed, what they could have changed. We'll look at two main series for group stage against Saudi Arabia, which they lost, and then the quarterfinal against China, which they also lost. If we start with this first fight on Samoa Downtown, we can see two slightly different approaches where both teams are playing literally the same comp. USA are going to be grouped up here, whereas Saudi Arabia are going to go for a 3-2 split. So then Lucio is going to do a big flank like this, while KSA and Quartz try and push the main angle as well. So if you're Team USA, what you want to try and do is not let yourself get pincered. If you get pincered, you're probably going to lose. You have to try and kill one side, overload one side, whether that means you wall off the Lucio and push this side with your speed advantage, or you wall off this side and just try and force the May's ice block and get him out. Both are reasonable options, but you need to make one decision quickly. Unfortunately, USA don't really do that. They try and walk into KSA a bit, but you can see UB gets massive cleave on here, and then as both sides collapse, USA just get overwhelmed. We skip to the next fight, and Saudi Arabia are holding very aggressively, very close. They're going to try and surprise Team USA by going quickly around the corner with window here. They get the window off. The lamp's a little bit late for Kaluj. Just a couple of small mistakes. Maybe the wall could have been better from Sugar Free as well. Couple of small mistakes. Kaluj dies, and Saudi Arabia get a pretty straightforward fight win. Very next fight, we're going to see Saudi Arabia playing to hide again. This time they're hiding Yubi on the off angle, but Kaluj actually does a good job here. He spots and pokes him out. But what we're going to see from Yubi is a really intelligent decision. He's going to wall himself off. Saudi Arabia going to back up. But then right now, what Yubi's done, he's gone and find himself a second hiding space. The rest of his team have backed up, and suddenly, rather than trying to ambush them here, they're going to ambush them here instead. So even though USA were diligent the first time at finding Yubi, they're not diligent the second time. Yubi's going to get a big May ult round the corner. They're going to disengage fairly well, but Kaluj can't get out. Again, the lamp's slightly late. But to be fair, I think this is actually really high-level play from Saudi Arabia. This is really Florida-esque in terms of how they're using these ults on the hold. But for USA, it's a pretty devastating way to lose what is now 3 fights on the first round of the first COF. We move on to Beach, and the map layout starts to suit USA a little bit more when they run the Sojourn variant. Here we're going to see a fairly similar setup from Saudi Arabia. Again, UB and Haku looking for a soft angle, but it's not as powerful this time. Instead, what we're going to see is they have to group with KSA, and now the Saudis are going to try and push as 5. So what Team USA want to do is they want to try and absorb this first push, not die to this wall timing, and buy time and opportunity for Hydron to get value. That's why OG's even leaning a little bit towards Hydron's side, so he gets pocket and he can keep peeking aggressively. And that's exactly what happens in this first fight. USA are going to try and go aggressive. You can maybe make an argument Sugar Free's wall could have been used a little bit more just to be protective of Kaluj, but they managed to get the lamp onto Kaluj this time. They save him. Hydron's now got a crazy aggressive angle, making Madge's life really hard. Starts to get a lot of value. Team USA take a step back. And if you look at the way they disengage this as well, this is something Florida always did a lot, where the team would be holding one area and the Sig would actually disengage into a slightly different angle, because you can still get pocket from the BAP. But what this means is it opens up really big cleave for Sugar Free, damage for OG and Hydron and whoever's shooting this off angle. And they just push into this big pincer trap. And that's exactly what happens to Saudi Arabia here. They're going to push in. Yubi's going to get caught. Sugar Free's going to get a lot of value. And then, now they've absorbed this first dive, their ability to push back is so strong. And then they're going to be able to push out, deal with everything. Haku just make a nice late trade for Hydron, but the damage is done. They've won the fight. And this is actually how most of the fights look on Beach. And Team USA go on to win this round. When we get to Volcano, this is where I start to feel actually USA didn't have a good answer to how to play in this stage. They're going to be playing the Sojourn variant again. So just like Beaches, they want to try and occupy a lot of angles, make it difficult for Saudi Arabia to walk in. But here we see, for a lot of this map, they end up playing really as 5-man. You see Hydron try and take a bit of an angle now. And they do get a good wall and pressure onto KSA. I think, if anything, they could have been more aggressive on this timing. But in theory, the system looks okay right now. Hydron's got a bit of an angle. The problem with this angle here is he can get poked back, and it's quite hard for him to pocket him through this system. There's not good cover for Hydron to play. So as the fight goes on a little bit longer, we see again USA find themselves all on one angle. They're going to try and take a step back from this aggression, but Saudi Arabia are going to read that they're actually trying quite hard just to bait their engage. So Saudi Arabia choose to cap the point. They get the flip. Now Team USA are forced to respond. They come in. They do get a good wall again. Good lamp by Majid. And now this time the pushback from Saudi Arabia is pretty strong. We do see Hydron on this angle, but as soon as he starts to take a little bit of this poke, it becomes really difficult for him. You'll notice Quartz does a really good job on this push in here. They're going to walk in to help Yubi. But at this moment right here, Quartz is going to look behind him. And if you've watched my video on Saudi Arabia, you know how well they did versus China at knowing where to look and knowing where the danger is. Quartz looks back at the perfect time, gets a little bit of a chunk on Hydron, and now all of a sudden, Hydron's ability to peak and have impact in the fight is so limited. You compare this to Beaches, where they could have their core hero and Hydron here. They can keep Hydron pocketed and keep him in the game and relevant and being impactful. Here, there's no way for Rupal or OG to heal Hydron, so he's just forced out of the fight a little bit too easily. We see a similar problem on their hold, where they start holding this key position here, but then they all just come back to main. And because of this, Kaluj is going to use his shift, then KSA is going to open with Flux. Kaluj does a good job to get round the corner to mean that they can't kill him on this timing without shift. But they're all on the same angle, so they all de-peak the same angle, which means with just a single ult, they're able to take over the map. They're going to wall to cap again. And all of a sudden, this hold and retake look way too easy for Saudi Arabia to deal with. I'd really like to see where they either held in this position more aggressively or try to use more angles. Whether it was their Mei Lucio stay here, their Sigma stay in main, maybe their Bap could even lean this way. And that could even allow Hydron to actually play this angle a lot more aggressively and occasionally get topped up by the Bap as well. Then all of a sudden, if Saudi Arabia try to push into one of these angles, they've got all the other angles to collapse in on them, and it makes it a lot harder for them. So I think on this map, I really just don't think Team USA had a very good solution to how to play this type of matchup on this particular point. Once we get to Blizzard World, Team USA had a pretty reasonable defense. They nearly full held them, eventually held them just before the end of third. Have had a perfect attack on first point, capped it immediately. But then when we get to their second attack, we're going to see them start to run into some problems. So they're running Sojourn Echo instead of Sojourn Mei. So they lose the frontline battle a little bit, but they do have more power on the flanks and angles. So initially they're going to start by moving the cart. And what they want to do is try and move the cart as much as possible while trying to create an opening for that angle to come in. The problem is here, Kaluj goes a little bit early. So what's going to happen is they're actually just going to shoot down Kaluj. Kaluj probably could have done a better job managing his cooldowns. So Kaluj dies before this push even comes in. Because what happens now is Sugarfree's going to commit the ult. He's going to copy the Sigma. But you can imagine a world where Kaluj is still alive and able to move cart and just spamming them from here. And they've got UV on this high ground just with LOS of everything. It starts to become a really tricky situation for Saudi Arabia. So I think the idea in theory is good. It's just poor execution from Team USA. Team USA are going to try a really similar approach this time around on the fight. Kaluj again going to be forcing point. We've got the big swing from the Illari Sojourn on this side. And Sugarfree is going to play with his BAP here and just try and mark this door as much as possible. We can't really push it, but he can make it hard for Quartz to out. What Saudi Arabia are going to do is actually quite smart. They're going to drop this high ground immediately. So all of a sudden, even though Team USA have control of this high ground, everyone's de-peaked them. And what Saudi Arabia know is they need to try and win the fight in these two areas quickly, because if they don't, this power position from Team USA will take over. What they're going to do, they're going to drop the Flux Mayop combo on Kaluj. Same time, Majid and Quartz are going to try and push Sugar Free. So even though Hydron is eventually able to get value, they win the fight in this area. And Saudi Arabia played this really well. I think the idea was absolutely fine from Team USA. But honestly, if they're going to solo Flux Mayop your Sigma, they do get to kill him. So far, we've seen two pretty similar ideas from Team USA. One that didn't work due to poor execution, and the other one that didn't work because Saudi Arabia had a lot of ults and were able to respond quite well and quite strongly. Now, as we get to their third attempt, I think this is maybe where Team USA starts to fall apart a little bit. Suddenly, if we take a look at this setup, they've left RuPaul deep. I don't know if this is intentional or he just wasn't able to cross. They're going to go with 4 people here, and this initially looks like they're going to try and do some kind of push to take over high ground and eventually drop maybe their Echo or someone to cart, then try and take the fight from there. They make a slightly different decision. Instead, they're going to drop Kaluj underneath. Everyone's going to drop underneath, and Kaluj is going to go back to cart. I presume they're worried that cart is too far back to do the push. But because of this, Kaluj is going to go to cart. The Echo and Illari is going to try and walk top. And this becomes really easy for KSA and his team to mark. Now all of a sudden, they're just surrounded. They're all on the low ground. RuPaul tries to cross at a time that doesn't quite make as much sense. He gets caught by Majid. And all of a sudden, this just starts to not look like it makes sense. And this is where I think maybe Team USA have started to overthink it. I think their previous 2 pushes were good. They just messed them up. And now they're trying something different, but it's not as organized. It doesn't make as much sense. And we see them get punished for it here. And eventually they'll get cleaned up. They even drop the Illari ult in, which just makes it even more painful. It becomes a pretty straightforward hold for Saudi Arabia ultimately. As their 5-minute plus time bank has now nearly completely dwindled, we do get another good attempt from the USA. If we look at their approach here, Kaluj is going to go through tempo on his own. He's going to flux out to take high ground. At the same time, they have an aggressive swing here, and they have angles pressuring from main. And if we look how this fight goes for Team USA, everything starts perfectly. They get the flux out. Magic's going to try and respond with a Illari ult. Sugar Free gets this off angle, and now all of a sudden, if I pause it right now, we've got 2 Sigmas on off angles on this window. RuPaul and UV with a chance to peek. Lots of pressure going on. Magic's even going to get caught here by Ultraviolet. Point pressure's coming in now, and all of a sudden this looks in pole position for Team USA. Sugar Free's taken over the high ground. Quartz is going to manage to trade one on the right with Sojourn ult, but then Sugar Free's going to come back and trade him back. It's actually insane that Sugar Free's able to get this trade versus overclocking Sojourn, but he does get it. Equalizes it up to 4v4. Now, all of a sudden, USA find themselves all on low ground versus an all on low ground Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia about to have Flux and Mayo again. So Saudi Arabia eventually win with the ults, but the actual start and how they set up this fight seems really reasonable from USA. Obviously, it sucks that Quartz was able to get the trade, and maybe right at the end here as well, you think, was there a way they could start getting people back on high ground again to control these angles, put more pressure on these guys rather than just trying to take a straight fight? You could really make that argument. But in general, I think USA's big problem was they had 2 good attempts in their 5.5-minute time bank. Both of the times, Saudi ended up with a lot of good ults to deal with it. What you want if you have a 5.5-minute time bank is you want 5, maybe even 6 good attempts. They only got 2, and ultimately that cost them here on Blizzard World. Now we get to the China series, and this is meant to be the matchup that USA are really good at. All the scrimbucks say Team USA have been blowing China and South Korea dive out of the water, rolling them. So they should feel really confident coming into this quarterfinal, despite China obviously being a very talented team. Super having to come in for Kaluj and a lot of things changing. But in theory, it should still be really good for him. If we watch this first fight from Lijiang Tower, very first map, looks like a real classic anti-dive playstyle. We're going to see trying to do what all dive teams love to do, get a couple of angles on the go, try and set up some kind of dive once they bleed out some resources. But Team USA are aware of this. UV and Sugar Free are going to play it very well. They're going to play to mark this side, while Super just contains the Doomfist, limits his attention. Sugar Free goes for the play, and now the Soldier and Brig are walking up. UV's going to go match. Sugar Free's going to come with him. They're going to find the catch onto Lengtsa. Meanwhile, Super's just containing this angle, making sure there's no crazy nade value or anything like that. They're able to deal with it, and then they're able to push back. Classic anti-dive. And this becomes very much the nature of most of the series. The problem for Team USA is what happens is they lose lots of fights to little things like this. where they'll force China to come mostly from the same angle. Seems really good. Guxue's going to go for one cycle. And Guxue's going to get a pick here, but if you look at how he ends up getting this pick, he forces Sugar Free back, again trading cooldowns, and he just kills Sugar Free in this situation. And it's just such a weak way to lose the first pick. If I look at the map state right now, China are all on one angle. This is perfect for Team USA. But losing Sugar Free like this is devastating. It's such a horrible way to lose a fight. And always when you're playing versus dive comps and you're not mirroring, you're on some kind of anti-dive, they're always going to have very scary ultimates like Blade and Nano Blade, Rally, stuff like this. So when it's for non-ult fights, you need to make sure you nail those fights because inevitably you might have to lose a Nano Blade fight. Losing fights to little silly things like this is absolutely devastating. And this is what really started to hurt USA in this first map. If we look at how they eventually lose this first round, it's a simple situation that costs them. They're going to window to take space on point on the retake. All seems pretty reasonable. Nano's going to come back. So if I'm Team USA, what I need to do now is take a step back to deal with this Nano, then look for some kind of repush timing. Can we punish anything on the way out? But Guxue's going to go in behind. He's going to get this massive punch. Hydra maybe a little bit greedy to try and get the window damage. Ideally, obviously, you'd want Super to tank it and no one else to tank it, but it hits Hydron here as well, so he gets booped out. The lamp's going to be in time, but just a couple of inches too short. Doesn't quite work out for him. And now, once again, a pretty simple situation has gotten away from Team USA and they find themselves in a hole. And these are the situations that absolutely kill you versus dive, losing little fights to these small things. Similarly, the first fight on all coughs are normally pretty good for the anti-dive team, because it's really hard for the dive to have ults at this point, and we can see USA try and exploit this by how aggressively they push in here. You can see, even though there's a threat of Shine on off angle for Genji Brig, they're trying to push forward out of it and just put pressure onto Monk, who has no real peel, so it sets up a pretty good option for Sugar Free to turn this kill. They have to lamp to save UV, which is a bit of a shame. They probably should, if anything, be extra cautious now because RuPaul has no cooldowns. But they do manage to get the rock and punish onto Guxue. Just at the worst possible time, RuPaul tries to duck into this corner to avoid this damage. But inadvertently, Lengths is still there, walks into him, manages to get booped out, sets up Lee for what's going to be... Go back a little bit, but Lee ends up turning what is a 3v5 situation. He dashes out of the rock here, and there's a point now they've killed Monk. They punish Guxue. It's now a 5v3. First fight, no ults. It's got to be Team USA's to win, but RuPaul gets booped back in. Leaves able to find one, find a second one. Unbelievably, he's able to find not just a third, but get out as well. So Leaves now turned a 3v5 situation, and this is so devastating for Team USA. You might have heard the saying, lightning doesn't strike twice, and that's actually normally very true, but it isn't true if you're playing Lijiang Tao Control Center against Team China in a World Cup quarterfinal. Because we're going to see Team USA walk in again, take a really similar approach to the very first fight. They want to walk aggressively, walk aggressively. There's probably a moment here. This bash in from UV is probably too aggressive because his whole team's pushing in and rotating. He wants to probably just whip this Genji and keep trying to rotate with his team. This bash in is going to force RuPaul to lamp him, which is then going to be a big problem later in the fight. But even then, they've now killed for backline. So if I pause it again right now, it's a 5v3. There's no supports. There's a Meteor Strike, and there's maybe a couple of ults coming up, but a little bit tagged. There's no way they can turn this fight. Surely it wouldn't happen again. But if we go on Leaves' point of view, they don't have the lamp, which ends up costing them here, and suddenly everything just lines up for Leave. Guxue's going to land a big punch. And once again, 3v5, USA find themselves on the losing side of it. And now you get to the difficult situation on Dive. They have Nano Blade. You have to retake into Nano Blade. We're going to see Team USA walk up here. And I think Team USA do a fairly reasonable job of spacing. They're going to drop the window aggressively at the choke to try and make some space. And you see the Nano actually gets used a little bit early. And you can see already, look at suddenly the distance between the two groups. Team USA are anticipating what's coming next. They know the Nano Blade is coming. They're trying to take a step back to deal with it. But the Nano Blade comes. It's such a powerful combo. Leave dodges the rock, still kills RuPaul. The rest of China push forward and finish them off. This is Team USA's problem. This fight is really hard for Team USA to win window versus Nano Blade. But the problem is they lost the two previous fights, so they find themselves losing this fight actually means the map is almost over, whereas really That should have been China having to use the Nanoblade for their first retake if they didn't lose back-to-back 3v5s. Then we get to Midtown, and this is probably the most one-sided map of the entire series. They're going to get full held here, Team USA. And if we look at their approach is going to be basically always the same. They're always going to try and come this way. They're going to try and just peek out slowly, try and take a bit of space, and then look to play counter dive and punish when China come in. And I have to imagine, because Team USA picked this map, Midtown is a hard map to dive. I think that's true. Agree with the decision to pick Midtown. And the way they attack this, it must have worked in scrims. They must have always been able to punish the dive as it came in, whether it was against South Korea or China in the scrims. But when we come to the match here, everything goes against them. And this is where you can maybe make an argument for, well, if it worked in scrims and a few small things go wrong in matches, maybe that is underperformance. So let's take a look at the fights here. Initially, they're going to come through wide. They get a little bit of space. Super's going to try and block the nade timing here. Leave's going to find a timing to go in. Just hits all the stickies and kills UV. Then from there, they're able to eventually slowly but surely bleed them out. Leave's able to find another kill. And Team USA have to go back to the drawing board. We'll go to the next fight, and they'll try a really similar approach again. What's going to happen this time, though, is going to be another small mistake. If we get to where Team USA are going to start taking space on this side of the map, then in a second, we're just going to see Hydron take top now. And all of a sudden, there's just this little divide between the supports and Hydron. Leave and Gushue going to be switched on. They spot the split. And they kill him before the fight even starts. And once again, Team USA find themselves a man down before they really get to do anything. And now Team China are just able to choke him out slowly but surely. Get one trade, but it's not going to make a huge difference. Lengths will be back in time. As we go to the next fight, they're going to try and switch it up and try and do a really similar thing, but come from main. And this one actually starts to look a little bit better. They're going to send most of their team main. They're going to have a couple of people to swing this side wide. UV's going to go in here in a second. They're going to nano Gushue in, but it's actually a really nice kite from UV in a second here. What's going to happen? Here comes the dive from Gushue. Hydron's going to slide out. We're going to see UV come this way as well. Gets a nice kite into green. RuPaul puts pressure onto Monk. We're all trying to kite back. And now they're just trying to all live and then eventually look for a pushback timing. And what's going to happen now is Gushue's going to double down. So Super goes for the Flux. But Monk hits a really nice sleep. Super had a pretty rough time of Fluxes across this series. This one of the rougher ones. So now instead of being able to Flux this Doom and kill him, they find themselves on the back foot. Super's going to get punished by Leave. The Visor over the top. And USA find themselves back in the drawing board again. So even for one that looks a little bit better going from main, Monk finds a nice outplay. And now Team USA are in panic stations. They're over to Echo, they're over to Orisa. And now they're improvising. They're going to try and do something similar where they come this way and stick their Orisa on point. The problem you'll see once they get into a formation here is they're going to have Orisa on point and their Bap Illari here. So if I pause it right about now, we always talk about being scared against dive if you isolate yourself too much. And right now, these guys are really isolated. Super has no way to meaningfully help these. What I would have really liked, and this is maybe true for all of their pushes, is if they did some kind of rotate through here, get everyone into the bottom floor of house, then had their Sigma or Orisa peek onto point, maybe have someone swing out here at the same time as well, and then just try and force the objective at the same time you swing, and you've got a nice kite location back in here. And that's how I think we do it on London, and I think, to be fair, that's just a better way to approach Midtown. Obviously, I imagine what they did worked in scrims, but it doesn't work here. They end up isolating themselves. UV with a nice attempt at the counter dive Ilario, but Lengths is on top of them with Rally, and they'll slowly but surely just find someone to turn on. First Hydron, then they're all able to push back. Lee's going to get crazy value with a copy Ilario, and they'll complete the full hold. It's fair to say they go on to lose that Midtown, and we go to New Junk City. So once again, it is USA's choice. I think New Junk City is a harder map to dive, and now USA are also mixing up. They're going Orisa, Genji, and obviously, as a Team UK coach, I have a particular soft spot for anyone who finds himself in a bit of difficulty, then chooses to go Orisa, Genji in a World Cup elimination match. Especially in a quarterfinal. It can happen. It's a good choice. I promise you. But for Team USA, it actually goes better than it does for Team UK. They win the first point just by playing quite similarly to how we saw them play on that Lijiang Tower control center. They played aggressively, never gave space for China to set up and get all these angles. And now if we look at this fight, it's going to be a Nanoblade fight for China. But Team USA, once again, use aggression, use tempo. Do not let them set up. We're going to see the Bastion ult to kick it all off from Hydron in a second. This is going to force China to panic and pull the trigger. Now, all of a sudden, Super's making an aggressive play. Sugarfree's making an aggressive play. They give themselves a really nice 2v3. Meanwhile, the Nanoblade is going in the back. Super's going to get a huge Terror Surge here. Sugarfree's going to find loads of follow-up damage. Meanwhile, they've spaced quite nicely. One thing that's always hard for a Genji to deal with, it's quite hard for a Genji to kill a Bastion, even with Nanoblade. So RuPaul's going to hit a pretty nice lap to help UV get the beat off. They get the beat off. Sugarfree and Super find 2 kills. Then all of a sudden, Hydron has kited this way. And he's actually even able to kill Leave eventually in this one. And all of a sudden, they just want to fight versus Nanoblade. And what happens for the rest of this is it starts just to become a real dogfight in terms of who can clutch these close situations. The problem with taking Team China to a dogfight where you have to try and win clutch situations to win the map is China are really good in these situations. They proved it at the Overwatch League playoffs when they were playing under Spark, and they proved it again, time and time again, at the Overwatch World Cup. We'll see another aggressive push come in from Team USA here. Going to wrap around the corner, coming in with the Blade. Super's shepherding them all in. Shy's going to pop the overclock. But he should surely be in big trouble. The lamp comes in, Blade on top. And now, again, you look at this situation at this moment in time. Shy's dead, surely. Leaves in big trouble. Sugarfree's Blade is going to win the fight, right? But Legza hits the perfect bash. That allows Shy just to get the body shot melee off onto Sugarfree. Then all of a sudden, Shy's able to take over. Now he's got the rally and Sojourn going. A big clutch by China, able to turn this point back in their favour. They go on to win that point to tie it up 1-1, but it really could have gone either way. And as we find ourselves now on the third point, USA in a situation where they're holding, posturing aggressively to go with this Terror Surge. If they win this fight, they win this point, put themselves up 2-1 on the map. They're all posturing quite aggressively. You can make an argument that RuPaul's peak here is unnecessary. Like, he would just be better here. Look to go around with his team round the corner. But he ends up jumping up at the worst possible time. Shy's coming with Nano Sojourn ult, hits for one shot. Super's going to try and mark him afterwards, but Shy just has too much damage with this ult combo. They're able to get a very easy retake and keep themselves alive on this point. Obviously, they still have plenty of chances to retake. We see them coming through the inside here. Leave's going to try and go early with Blade. But what we see is a really good decision from Super. They're going to deep peek for Meteor Strike. Leave's going to keep going with Blade. A lot of pressure right now in this area. But I think they've made a bit of a mistake here, China, because it's hard for the rest of their team to follow up into this corner. Super's going to make a really good decision with his Terror Surge to use it defensively. He's going to catch Leave. They're going to trade Goucheway as well. They lose Hydron, but 2-for-1 trade, and they use Blade. Seems pretty good. Now a 4v3 to win this point. Should look okay. They're going to walk forward with Blade. But once again, China always good for one in the clutch. Length is going to pop the rally. Hits the bash onto Sugarfree. He gets a body shot from Shy and a body shot from Monk. He goes down. All of a sudden, now Team USA look a little bit lost in the mid-fight. Yuvi's going to go aggressively. Gets hit by another bash. Just out of sync with their aggression. And all of a sudden, out of what looked like a lost fight and a mistake from Leave, China have turned it and will eventually go on to win this point. Realistically, this could have been a 3-0 New Junk City to Team USA by now, but China have been good in the clutch multiple times. As we go into what will end up being the final fight, Team USA coming up against a Rally Blade, so we're in a similar situation to before, where Super's probably going to have to try and play a counter dive Terror Surge here. China are going to come in with the Rally Blade in a second. They get a nice punch onto Hydron, but this time he's a little bit closer to everyone. The lamp looks good from RuPaul, but it just LOSs here, so Hydron's going to get one shot between Legza and Shy. They managed to kite the Blade reasonably well and get back together. There's maybe an argument Super could drop a Terror Surge right now. He ends up holding it on to try and cancel the Doom's punch after Meteor Strike. Maybe ends up being a bit greedy. Maybe it was already too done. You can make an argument that rather than counter diving in this area where it's quite open, you'd rather counter dive in this room or the room that's just off screen here. This would have been better. But ultimately, China come through in the clutch. They managed to find the one shot on Hydron through all the cooldowns. And then from there, they're able to just turn the rest of the kills and eventually cap this point and complete the 3-0. The ultimate question then maybe becomes, did the USA underperform? Did they deserve all the flame and criticism they got on Reddit? And I think, did they underperform? Yes. I think when you look at the Samoa volcano against Saudi Arabia, I can look at it and say USA should understand the map better. They don't have a good solution, at least not as good as Saudi Arabia's, for how to exploit that map's power position. But when I look at a lot of the other maps, the Blizzard World attack, well, most of Team USA's ideas were fine. It was just poor timing and poor execution, and that's not necessarily a coaching problem or an understanding problem. That's an underperforming issue. If you have good ideas but can't execute in the game, you're underperforming. Then when we get to the China series, again, the theory looked good. The way they were playing, the way they were starting these fights looked so good, but they would lose the late fights. You can't afford to lose too many one fights from those situations against a team of China's quality. They will pull you apart, and that's what we saw. I think you can also make a real argument that there were no carry performances. When I think of Sugarfree on Vancouver, or I think of Kaluj on Sigma, these are players who can carry games, make big impact in big moments. And I don't think we really saw that from either of those players in some of the key games against Saudi Arabia and China. So did they underperform? Yes. Did they underperform to the degree that their fans should be horrified and upset with them? I really don't think so. A lot of small things go their way, and suddenly they're beating China. I mean, if you even look at how the bracket fell, if they had beaten Saudi Arabia in groups and end up on the other side of the bracket, they would play Spain in a double flex mirror. They beat Spain in a double flex mirror. Then they play Finland in the semi-final. Finland really struggled into Saudi Arabia's double flex. So 100% they struggled into Team USA's as well. So all of a sudden, if USA got that nicer side of the bracket, they'd end up in the finals. Maybe they'd still lose to China. But they'd finish second then. And then I don't think we'd be having these conversations in quite the same way. The criticism wouldn't be as harsh on Team USA. Should USA have done better? Yes. Did they underperform? Yes. Was it as bad as I think a lot of people are maybe making out on social media and Reddit? Not at all. It could have been better. It almost was better. And I think Team USA, as much as they'll be disappointed with the result themselves, it wasn't as bad as everyone was making out. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.